Well then, the channel with a Pokemon profile picture is covering a Pokemon game. Who could have guessed this was ever going to happen? Hey guys, it's Glitchy here with our first time covering a Pokemon game, and it definitely won't be the last since there's about 8 Pikachus on this channel, with this video probably going to contain the 9th on the thumbnail at the very least. And as much as I obviously love Pokemon, I have plenty to bitch about in this review, as does every single Pokemon fan whenever a new game comes out. But that doesn't mean I absolutely hate it, as I have been unable to put this game down and have basically been exclusively playing this game since it came out, which at the time of recording this is about 4 days ago. I also wanted to say I know I promised a Battlefield video in the Black Ops 7 beta video, but I haven't played enough of it to be able to form a coherent video on it, or a script to say. So I figured we'd cover Pokemon Legends ZA. And I think from a different form and fashion, I think we're going to get into the negatives first, because there's plenty of that. So, Pokemon Legends ZA is built like a dumpster that is desperately trying to explode on an almost constant basis. But because it has too many people around it that are basically putting out the fuse instantly, it just can't do what it wants to do. And to get into what I actually mean, the game runs perfectly, but only because I personally am playing on the Switch too. I know for a fact, if I was playing on an original Switch, this game would actively give its CPU cancer and burn out the GPU like a kid's lung in a chain smoker's household. Now, why do I think this? How can I tell this game would kill an OG Switch faster than lightning hits a metal rod? Because the entire map is rendered all at once at all times. That's not even mentioning the fact that the entire map is one model. There is no reason this should be the case, because any normal open world game has it to where the game renders only what the player is looking at any given moment. Games like GTA and Skyrim have to use this method, because if they didn't, it would make whatever system is trying to run the game at the time spontaneously combust. This also pairs with something I'm sure everyone who plays Minecraft is familiar with, render distance, which ZA has that shit turned down to like 3 fucking chunks if we're talking block lingo. On an almost constant basis, you can see pop in from wherever you go. While it doesn't even do it all the time, there are so many instances where the game doesn't pop something in and has it rendered before you look at it, like how a game is supposed to. Then we'll unrender it at a safe distance where you won't see it unless you are deliberately paying attention to that specific thing. But on a much more frequent basis, you catch the game with its pants down and can see it render bullshit directly in front of your eyes. I do not understand how the devs got an extra year to work on this game, and they couldn't even fix the rendering issues that plagued Scarlet and Violet as well. Which I want to say there are no glitches in this game that are even close to being as horrendous as Scarlet and Violet. But why is the largest media franchise in the world even at a state where they are being praised by some for releasing a game that runs normally on hardware that is brand new when the textures look like a fucking Xbox 360 game? There is no texture in this game that demands 4K 60 FPS capable hardware. Almost every single texture in this game, if you get close enough with the camera, you can count the pixels. Even in some of the cutscenes in the game, you can clearly see the pixels in each model. They don't look smooth. When I first started playing, I asked my girlfriend her opinions on how the game actually looked. She doesn't play Pokemon, doesn't even like these kind of games. She put it in words that I personally would have added plenty more explicit language to. It looks flat. And it is just that fucking simple. The game looks flat because in most cases, it quite literally is. I will say, I can compliment the game on tricking me until I manage to find that all the textures for the buildings are just painted on flat surfaces. Because from far away, the textures look 3D until you actually manage to run up to the building. When you aren't paying attention to the game world desperately trying to crumble around you, the textures look fine, because you're most likely focusing on gameplay or literally anything else. The entire game world is like this except for a very small amount of areas. The only ones that come to mind are a sewer segment and a laboratory near the end of the game. And that's it. I can only come up with 2 areas in the entire game off the top of my head that actually made use of the hardware, being the Switch 2. Keep in mind that there are such beautiful games, even on the OG Switch. Breath of the Wild isn't the most graphically impressive game, but it makes up for it with art style. While games like Mario Odyssey and Metroid Prime Remastered look like games that belong on the best hardware nowadays. This isn't even counting games like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, where they expand on the idea that Nintendo is finally caught up graphically with the likes of PlayStation and Xbox. So what the fuck is really going on? Is this Game Freak's fault? Do they not know how to make a game look pretty? These are trick questions, because I already know the answer. Yes, they know how to make a game work correctly and make it work damn well while doing it. The real issue is they aren't being allowed to do exactly that. Even 2 years wasn't enough for Game Freak. But I genuinely bet that 3, or even 2.5 at this point, fucking any amount of time would have been better, would have been enough for them to make this world feel so much more lively and work flawlessly. Because they're able to do it when a company like Microsoft just throws money at them and lets them cook with their new game, Beast of Reincarnation. Game looks pretty good and will probably run fine since the hardware is even better than the shit Nintendo expects them to work with and optimize for. This is all surface level shit that you can simply realize or see, but the info that was found out from a Pokemon Company leak, the budget was $13 million. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, in their infinite wisdom, have realized they own the largest media franchise in the world and have made the connection. Well, if the game is going to sell no matter what, then why try? Thus, a low budget means much more profitability, since the game would only need to sell 200,000 copies to break even. Which is funny, because Scarlet and Violet sold almost 27 million copies. They made $1,607,400,000, and they barely put a little over 1/100th of that profit back into the next installment. And they had the fucking audacity to announce a DLC before the game even came out? All I can ask is why? This is beyond greed at this point. It's almost like they're challenging Game Freak out of spite to see if they could physically make a game on such a low budget with such a low amount of time, and then threatening each worker if they don't make a profitable product. Because a high budget does not equal a great game. I mean, look at all the modern Call of Duty games. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on each game, and almost every single one of them is ridiculed into the ground. But getting back to the actual game, since that was basically 90% of my thoughts, since the gameplay as a whole, to me, is really enjoyable. But there are definitely some really sore spots, which one of them has been an issue for Pokemon since a while now. Probably since Sword and Shield. But because of the lack of voice acting, there are so many moments in this game where I feel like voice acting would excel the game to be one of the highest points of the franchise, almost. It's funny because there is technically some voice acting, but there's only 2 lines, being whenever your character jumps off of something and whenever they're climbing up a ledge during the open world gameplay. It doesn't make any sense why they would add this if they didn't want to add even more, especially since they have clear lip syncing in the special cutscenes that play throughout the game. So why waste the effort? on adding 2 lines and lip syncing in cutscenes if you aren't going to add any actual voice lines at all. I'm not asking for literally everything to be voice acted. It could be like Persona 5, where it has full voice work in specific scenes. Then when it's less important, it only plays a small snippet, so then you know which character is speaking. But my other huge sore spot is when it actually comes to the gameplay, is that the ranked multiplayer is almost fucking useless and just feels like another excuse for Nintendo to make a bit more cash off of their online subscriptions, especially since they have locked some of the Mega Stones behind getting a specific rank on their ranked matchmaking. But since the ranked games are so pointless and tacked on gameplay wise, you can get to the rank in like 30 minutes if you're lucky, and then never touch it again until they add another Mega Stone that you want. All ranked matches consist of 4 players spawning into one of 3 arenas that they have thrown together, and then just having all 4 have a dick measuring contest by spamming moves and seeing just how many kills you can get in total. Doesn't matter whose Pokemon you kill. To get first, you just need the most. Even if you get second, you get plenty of points to rank up. You're only really screwed if you get last or tie for third, which all of this makes sense when you look back at Legends Arceus and realize it had literally 0 multiplayer features besides trading between players. So, seeing the success of that game, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo had to make an extra buck, which is unfortunate because the game is so fun, and if the game had an actual ranked mode that wasn't what we have now, one-on-one battles or even having the classic battle system for matchmaking, it would probably be one of my favorite parts. But with that rant basically out of the way, I think we can finally get into the positives of ZA. Legends ZA, if you ignore all the problems I had, which, may I remind you, almost had nothing to do with the gameplay besides the multiplayer section, has never made the formula for Pokemon feel so fresh, besides when Arceus first released. And even when we were of the belief that this game was just going to have the same gameplay system as Arceus, I personally was fine with that, especially since Scarlet and Violet felt extremely lackluster when compared to Arceus. But Game Freak went and outdid themselves by deciding they were going to make a completely new system that seemed to be inspired by the anime, as it would have actual real-time battles between the Pokemon that included trainers taking damage like how they did in Arceus when you'd fight wild Pokemon. This gameplay system not only feels extremely fresh since it hasn't been done before, but it also feels extremely fun and fluid, allowing you to get out of battles extremely fast since you aren't waiting for a bunch of text to go by, as well as getting stat updates whenever you or another trainer decide to use a move like Sword Dance or Growl. This, in my opinion, is the best the franchise battles have felt in history in the series, including even games like Black and White 2, which I believe to be the peak of the Pokemon series. As I said near the beginning of the video, I could not put this game down, and will probably continue playing this game until I complete the Pokédex after I'm done editing this video. Catching Pokemon and battling trainers in the ZA Royale feels addicting at the very least and extremely satisfying at most. Sneaking up on trainers in the battle zones and using my strongest Pokemon to start the battle with an instant feint is one of my favorite features they've added, and feels like a natural evolution of the gameplay introduced in Arceus. Which, speaking of evolution, we need to tackle the funny rocks in this game, being the absolutely iconic Mega Evolution finally making a return to the franchise after being absent since Gen 7, which was a post-game reward for Sun and Moon. Which, holy shit, that was 9 years ago. The glorious return of the best gimmick returns after the Pokemon Company realized we don't give a shit about Z-moves, Dynamax, or Terraforms. Mega Evolutions coming back also feels great since you can activate it as many times as you're able during a battle instead of once per battle like it was on the 3DS. Plus, there are plenty of new additions to the Mega Evolution roster, and there are plenty that are a mixed bag when it comes to actual design, but the fact that they brought it back at all is what really makes me shocked. Plus, Mega Evolution is one of the biggest parts of the story, so it doesn't just feel tacked on, which brings me to the story of this game. While most of the Pokemon game stories after Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire don't feel too important, I actually felt extremely happy with the story content in ZA. Mostly because the game does a really good job at melding the gameplay and story together for the most part. But even when it doesn't, the game doesn't slow down for too long. The characters all have distinct traits and feel really likable. Plus, the game is also pretty unique. It doesn't really have a villain, so to say, in the story. I kept wondering if they were going to do a twist villain like an Arceus, or have it revealed really late into the game that the villain was a shitty twist villain, like in Sword and Shield. But no. The game has a certain feel and direction throughout the entirety of the story, and the antagonists aren't really there to be villains, mostly there to be an opposing force, only to become an ally later. Kind of like how all of the enemies were for Ash in the anime. All I can really say is the game would have been improved a lot more with story aspects if we could hear the characters talk, but I already ranted enough, so we don't need to go there again. I also really like the music in this game and think that it finds its own identity pretty easily, even though this game is technically a reimagining of the world that X and Y took place in, speaking of, I thought it was going to be a huge issue given the scale of Arceus taking place all across the old Sinnoh region, and this game only taking place inside of Lumiose City, but the map is large enough and there's so much to do around the city, being side quests and little collectibles, that it actually didn't matter that much to me that I couldn't exit the city and go explore the rest of Kalos. The world does feel a little dull when you're just roaming around, but the really good stuff happens in the wild zones. These are where you catch Pokemon, and this is all just the same kind of stuff you'd get in Arceus, but still good and fun, which for the most part, I really hate to say this now, but that kind of wraps up my positives for the game. I wish I had as much positive content as I did negative content in this video, but for the most part, Legends ZA is a lot more substance gameplay-wise than it is basically everything else, which, what is there gameplay-wise is really fucking good. But when you start to get into the specifics for everything else, the game is damn near embarrassing. I wouldn't even say damn near. I would say the game is just fucking embarrassing. Which fucking sucks to say because I really wish that the game was just all good so I could do nothing more than say Pokemon is back. So I could glaze my favorite franchise, but all in all, I'd say if you're a huge Pokemon fan, that's the only way this game is worth checking out. But if you're looking to get into the series for the first time, I'd probably recommend one of the DS games or something like Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, so then you can understand that things weren't always this bad when it came to the Pokemon franchise quality-wise. I also wanted to end this video saying I'm thinking about streaming games on Twitch in between when I make videos, so if you like my content here, just in case, I'll leave a link to my Twitch down below, and if I do anything really fun there, I'll probably turn it into a video here. No promises though. So with that, if you felt so kind, please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And also, leave a comment down below letting me know who your favorite Pokemon is. See you when I see you. This is Glitchy, signing off.